One of the first things we can do to see if there's a waterlogged tank and failed diaphragm is to tap on the tank. Here, it's kind of solid, hollow, 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 hollow up on the top, solid down below. The tank is probably not failed. So we'll check the air pressures and stuff like that too, but I think we're good. This video is to address the concerns on this report from Brian Berry, Puncher's Supply. I have currently turned the well pump off. The disconnect is actually on the panel of the side of the house, that residence over there. What I'd like to do first is address the tank issue, which he says he found to be waterlogged with the bladder ruptured. Right now, the system shows to have approximately 60 pounds of pressure in it. If the tank were ruptured, the valve up here, which supplies pressure to the bladder, would have moisture coming out of it. Just a little bit of a push and we get air coming out of it, so that's a good sign. What I plan to do now is drain all of the pressure out of the system since the weld switch is off, shut off is off, and here's a valve right here that will drain the water down so that our pressure will go to zero here after a minute or so. This also indicates there seems to be pressure in the tank, more than just water pressure, because the pressure is dropping slowly instead of dropping off very, very quickly. While that's draining down, I'd like to look at this here. This is the pressure switch cover that he was referring to that has the hole melted in it. So I pull that off. You can kind of see the location of that hole is down here way on the side, which is down in this location here. If the contacts arcing was creating enough heat to, and there they go, enough heat to melt a hole, it would be up in this area here, not down there. I think this hole, if you look at it closely, it's actually got melted plastic there, and it kind of appears that the heat was come from the outside, not necessarily from the inside. I'm not sure where that hole came from, but it'd be hard pressed to say that it was coming from these contacts here. It does appear that the contacts here on the right do have some burn issues. These on the left here do not. It seems like that was a pre-existing condition. At one point we had this switch rewired because only one leg was being switched, not both legs of the 220. So I think this problem was from a long time ago, not a current issue. So let's see where we're at here. So yeah, it's slowly dropping. We'll watch it go down, and then yeah, it's just draining out there. I got it draining out of the hose right there. So we'll let all the pressure run out here. Sorry for the wiggly movement of the camera. We'll let all that pressure drain out, and then we'll test the pressure with a pressure gauge that's in the bladder up there in that valve. The manufacturer here says they send it with 38 pounds of pressure from the factory. That's what the bladder pressure should be inside the pressure tank. So we'll know here in a minute if there's any pressure there at all, and confirm if our bladder is actually ruptured and become waterlogged. Although I didn't get any water out of that valve, so I'm kind of hopeful that our bladder is not waterlogged. So let's see. Yeah, it's taking its sweet time here. Okay, I'm going to start the video back up again after the water's drained out. Okay, so we finally have all the pressure out. That took quite some time. All the pressure's gone out of the system. You see the hose over there. There's no water coming out of that. So we're going to take this gauge here and see what we've got in the tank, in the bladder tank here. So sure enough, there's no pressure to speak of in that tank. So I think what I'd like to do is go ahead and put a 38 pounds of pressure in that tank and see if it'll hold. That's what I'm going to do next. And we'll start the video back up after that. Okay, so I've loaded that up, pressurized the bladder with 35 pounds of pressure, and we'll see if it holds. Right now it seems to be doing quite nicely. It did not seem to be leaking out as I was airing it up. We've got a full 60 pounds in our system, so I'm just going to turn the water on and see how quickly it drains off. Certainly seems like it drops off a lot slower with pressure in that tank, which is good. So hopefully tomorrow when I check the pressure, there'll still be 35 pounds of pressure in it. And the action of it still seems to be very, very good. So we'll check this, and then this these contacts. We'll see how well they do. Certainly the ones on the right there have a lot more corrosion than the ones on the left. Like I said before, I think that's previous issues, not current issues, but might look at replacing this pressure switch just so we don't have issues later on. So let's see. Yeah, that takes quite a bit longer to go from off to on. And we'll check the action of this, see how it does. Okay, so it's the next day on this tank, and I went ahead and checked the pressure on the tank, and it's holding good at 35 pounds. And so I'm filling the system back up now, and looks like we've got coming up on shut off here. I wanted to look at these contacts as we get shut off, see how much these contacts, especially on the right, are arcing. And it should shut off here shortly. See what happens. Okay, so a little excessive on the arcing there on the right, so I think certainly the recommendation is to replace that pressure switch. And then the other thing I wanted to do now that it's been setting for a day is go ahead and check that pressure there. We're just over 60. The marks on the gauge are kind of a little confusing. Those are marks that were put there to show the shut off and the shut on, cut on for the pump pressure. But just to confirm that we don't have a short cycle issue, this valve here, I'm going to turn it on and see how quickly the pressure drops off. So you basically see that it is dropping off very slowly, and that's great. If the tank was flooded, that pressure would drop off very quickly within a few seconds and short cycle the switch. It would cycle from on to off very quickly without the pressure tank working properly. So we have real confirmation here that that pressure tank is doing its job, and so I'm satisfied with that. I was going to see how long it actually took time-wise to cut back on again. Because I think we're pushing about 10 gallons a minute. And so, well, that's what the report said anyway. And so we can get a real good idea of how much volume comes out of that pressure tank before it kicks the pump back on. So when it gets down around 40, it ought to cut that pump back on again. I'll just see how long it takes. I think this is a great test and indicator of the fact that the pressure tank is working properly and not short cycling. I ought to hear those contacts click any second now. Okay, so that was the contacts clicking back on again. You see them there, they're back together again. So it's going to pump back up to the 60 plus pounds, and once it does, it'll shut off. I'm not gonna wait for that to happen. That'd be another 3 or 4 minutes. But I'm content and convinced that the tank is in fine shape.